Thanks a lot. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm just going to start with a disclaimer. I know there's a few journalists in the room, and I think we've all talked, and we've all come to an agreement that is what's said in the room stays in the room, because I think this is going to be a dialogue about what's really going through people's heads when they do these crazy things. And we're going to talk about some successes, we're going to talk about a lot of things that didn't go well, and so we have that agreement, and if there's any journalists that don't like that idea, step outside, please, because this is going to be a dialogue. You know, I could give you all the talking points that you read and all the articles, and no one's going to get anything out of this. So we're going to go right into Q&A, probably within 5 minutes, because I think that's where we really get all the rich dialogue out of this. There's a million things I could say, but why don't we talk about the things that you want to hear? So you know a little bit about the background. I mean, the background is this whole traditional go to school, get a job with the big company, learn, and get on your career path. And that was a great career path, and everything was going well. And I love GE to this day. I mean, I had no entrepreneurial bug in me whatsoever until I met Tim Keene. And Tim has been a mentor of mine for years, and he just put that bug in. He's like, Andy, what are you doing? You're smart. You're doing all this, and you're making a salary and maybe a bonus, and they're taking all the money, and they're taking all the glory, and you're not getting anything out of this. Why aren't you doing this on your own? And he pushed and pushed and pushed, and finally we found the right company. And, you know, I really thank my entire entrepreneurial career to Tim Keene. He's been a wonderful mentor to this day. But, you know, the point here is this wasn't pre-planned. You know, this wasn't going through my head that I'm going to take this step and this step and this step, and then I'm going to get to that point. I mean, this just kind of happened. But there were a few things that allowed it to happen. And I think one of the biggest things that allowed it to happen was being in rooms like this, being at places like the University Club or Marquette University, where thoughts are coming together, where mentorship just naturally happens. And if you're there, you're going to be in the right place at the right time when the right idea comes up and the opportunity is going to present itself to you. So I think my first real point is put yourself out there and make those connections and meet those people. Have something to offer them, and they'll have something to offer in return. Every single job I've had since I got hired at GE has been through a connection. I haven't interviewed for a job since 1998 when I graduated. It's all been through these types of natural connections and mentorships, et cetera, et cetera. You know, we can talk about what goes through your head when you're making that leap. For me, it was very, very easy. I knew what my career path was at GE, and it would have been more of the same, and I knew, you know, eventually I'd probably get fired, and I could hang on as long as I could before you get kicked out, and that's just the model at GE. And when you get kicked out, you usually have a nice, cushy landing at some other company. You know, but at the end of the day, I thought, if I look back and I don't take this risk and I don't take this leap, I'm always going to wonder, what if? And all of the decisions I'm making right now and the decisions I've made pretty much through my life have always been 10 years out. I never want to look back with regret and saying, what if I did that? What if I took the other option? There's no way I was going to look back and say, oh, what if I'd stayed at that mid-level management job at GE? You know, I knew what that was. There was no what if. You know, but if 10 years from then, I'm sitting in some other mid-level management job in GE, I said, oh, what if I made that leap? What if I could have done that entrepreneurial thing? You know, I'd be kicking myself for the rest of my life. So that's kind of the thought process that I go through as I make these types of decisions. So it was actually a pretty easy decision. Even if the whole thing tanked and the whole thing failed, yeah, I'd have a bruised ego. But I'd go back to GE, and they'd take me back, and they'd be happy to have me back. So there was really no downside to that first leap of faith. One of the other things that I've really learned along the way is try to understand what you don't know and get the best people to supplant where you have weaknesses. I remember there's a woman named Sue Marks. A lot of you guys probably know her. She was on our board at EM Systems. And we were talking in the early days. I said, well, I don't think we need a CFO because I'm decent at math and I know how to do Excel and we can't afford a CFO, so why don't I just do that part-time, you know, while I try to grow this company. And she just took me, you know, almost basically punched me between the eyes and said, you're either incredibly arrogant or incredibly stupid. I think it's a little bit of both. We're going to hire you a part-time CFO because you can't do that. Your job is to grow the company. Your job is to do this other stuff. And she was 100% right. You know, and I think without mentorship like that and without understanding that, yeah, you know what, you're going to pay a little bit, but you're going to get that expertise, and that person is going to be so much better than you are. You know, that's kind of been our mantra throughout the whole thing with EM Systems and now with Dynamis, even more so. We're really good at a few things at Dynamis. There's some things we just don't have that skill set in our DNA, and we're hiring it out. And we're not afraid to spend a little bit of money to do it right, rather than fool ourselves into thinking, you know, we're really good at things that we're not. I'd rather just go right into Q&A if that's all right with you all. There's a lot of things that are in the back of my head that I want to get out, but I think all of them are going to come out with questions. And
Andy, what do you think is right and what do you think is wrong with this area for starting a business?
Yeah. All right, that's an easy one. I'm from here. I love this city. I've lived all over the world, and I'm back here, and I'm here to stay. Here's what's right about this region. When you hire someone who's from here, they're going to show up to work. All right? They're going to be loyal to your company. They're going to stay with your company. We have the strongest loyalty. We have the lowest absenteeism. We have the highest volunteerism rates in the country with our workforce. And this spans all generations of the workforce. And it's an extremely loyal and talented workplace. And that's fantastic. I think what's wrong with this place is we have some sort of an inferiority complex that is totally misguided and unfounded. We should be screaming from the rooftops why this is the best place to start a business. Why our people are so loyal and so dedicated and smart, and why we should be keeping those people here. I love going into Marquette or UWM or MSU or any of the schools and talking about all the great things that are happening in here, all the things that our students should be doing at that phase in their career paths, and then trying to keep them here. And trying to link them up with people like Tim and others in this room so that they can find their mentors and find a reason to stay here. This is a fantastic place. All right, are we Silicon Valley? Do we have millions of potential developers that we can just go pull from? No, we have less. We have less technology companies, but we have enough. I've never had trouble hiring anyone in any position at any company. So I think we should just stop apologizing and start talking about all the good things that we have here and go from there.
Can you, from your experience, the jobs that were created in your company and the exit, are the jobs staying here or are they going with the acquired company?
Yeah, and this isn't fair. So when we start companies, we start them with investors and we start them to make money for the investors, right? And there's a bunch of side benefits like creating jobs, like making the investors rich and all this other stuff. The main purpose is for the investors. And everything we do has to have our investors in our, they're the key stakeholder. I could say it's our customers, it's our employees. Well, it's not. It's our investors. And every decision we make is in the long-term interest of the financial interests of our investors. Jobs is a nice side benefit, but I'd be lying if I told you the reason we're doing this is to create jobs. We will create jobs, and we have created jobs, and those jobs, for the most part, have stayed here. So when we sold EM Systems, here's what happened. All the technology jobs stayed here. All of the brain power stayed here. The intellectual capital, the industry expertise stayed here. Some of what you might call the back office functions got consolidated with the parent company in Florida. So accounting, finance, stuff like that left, and those jobs went away. But they're still hiring in the other, in the other areas of the business. So those jobs are still here, and we're still creating more jobs as that company grows under under new leadership and new ownership. Yeah, but some went away. But we knew that would happen, and I guess we were okay with that.
So if you say that Milwaukee needs to get over the inferiority complex that we have, and I would agree with you on that, and that we need to start talking more about what we are and what we have accomplished, how do you actually see us doing that? Because there's different entities that think they're doing it, but maybe not doing it in a concentrated effort.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
Well, I think
how do we accomplish that?
It's interesting. Does anyone read the Biz Times or the Business Journal or the Journal Sentinel and Kathleen Gallagher's articles and whatnot in there? They're all great stories about really cool things that are happening here. So that the press is on it and the information is there and the stories are out there. I don't understand why this complex still exists because we're doing a lot of cool things and we're starting to talk about them. I think part of this, look, I'm uncomfortable up here because I'm in a room full of what I consider my peers and I'm supposedly trying to, inform you guys. I'm not going to inform you on anything you probably don't already know, so it's uncomfortable for me, and I think that's part of it here. No one wants to toot their own horn, but sometimes we need a little bit of that to create the buzz and get everyone really excited about what's going on here. So, that's part of the reason I agreed to do this, because it hopefully will create a buzz and get other people to say, I want to go out and I want to do that same thing.
Andy, are you saying we should lean in?
Yeah, I heard it. If anyone was at the Pabst Theater Monday night where we had the talk about how to make Milwaukee better, and we had some excellent panelists, I forget his name, but he was swearing, he was so passionate about it. He's like, don't apologize for who we are. Go out and scream from the rooftops what makes Milwaukee great. And he's 100% right.
Do you think it's an inferiority complex, or do you think it's a conservative culture?
Yeah.
Because I've lived in various pockets. I live west, east, and there is kind of a modesty and humility about this culture that, at least it seems to me, is quite different than self-promotion that I found on both coasts.
And again, I'm not as qualified as other people in the room to answer this question. I think it's probably both. It is a conservative culture, but it is. But we deal with it. I think England and Great Britain and Ireland are more conservative by nature too, but there's some great entrepreneurs there as well. And I think they're very conservative, even maybe more conservative than we are, and yet there's some great companies popping up there. I mean, look at Virgin and whatnot. I mean, it's happening everywhere. So it certainly can happen here, even with that type of culture. But anyway.
Tell us about your toughest decision.
Yeah, so the toughest decision. So there's been some really tough decisions, but I'll tell you a few little tricks that I've learned. So my story that you know, EM Systems, and we have EM Systems that's looking like it's a success story. And then we hit a point where, you know, those of us that are insiders in the industry see it growing, but then we see a point where, all right, the market's saturated, state governments are contracting, we're grant funded, this thing might come to a screeching halt potentially. And so here's what's going through my head in 2009 is, you know, every little penny of my net worth is tied up in this thing, right? Everything. This is going to be like all or nothing. And the whole thing could go to zero within a year or so. All right, so I'm not sleeping at night. I'm scared to death. I'm luckily talking with our investors at the time saying, you know, this is what I think might be coming. What should we do? And they're like, well, we should exit. That's easy. And so we actually planned the exit. We ended up timing it, you know, pretty close. But during that exit, now we're starting to put real dollars on the paper. We hire the best investment banker in town. We hire the best lawyer in the country, and we put this thing up, and we go through the process. And now the real numbers are starting to show up, and now I'm really getting nervous, and I'm getting sick. I'm getting sick to my stomach. I think I have an ulcer. I'm taking Ambien, and I'm like, I don't know if I can get through this thing. And so I actually, again, opened up with the investors and said, what do we do? I'm so nervous. I'm like a freak show here. And they actually came up with this little scheme. They said, well, you know what? I get it. What if we could take some of your chips off the table before we actually sell the company? And so what they did is we actually went out and got a mezzanine round. So we did mezzanine debt and used that debt to basically do a dividend to the ownership of the company so we could all take some of our chips off the table. And that money was ours to keep no matter what happened with the business. And then I could sleep at night. And I'm like, well, now the worst case isn't zero. At least it's something. And then we went through the process, and it happened, happily ever after. I wouldn't have known we could have done that. I wouldn't have known anything about that. But luckily we had all of us on the same page, and our ownership, just like our ownership when it was Golden Angels, was, we confided in each other because, the end game was going to be the same for all of us. So that was, it was a tough learning, and I was even more immature when you owned the company and we were exiting the first time, and it was my very first time doing that. Tim sat me down in a room while we were exiting, and I think he said 7 times to me, "You don't listen." And before he could get the word "listen" out, I'd be like, "But hey, you don't listen." I said, it went on like 7 times, and I wasn't listening, and he was right as usual. And I think I was either just immature or nervous or whatever it was as an early stage entrepreneur. At least he stuck through, and he stuck through with that conversation, and he stayed in the room, and he told me what we had to do, and of course it was scripted perfectly, and we did it, and we were happy in the end. Luckily I had people like that didn't just say screw it and walk out, right? They helped get me through it. I certainly wouldn't have done that first exit or the second exit on my own. No way.
I had a question regarding collaboration in starting a business. Years ago it was brick and mortar. You knew the guys and the women that you worked with. You knew the names of their kids. You understood what they did on the weekend. Today it's real easy to have a virtual CEO or a CFO, a coder. What's your thought on moving forward in this space?
Yeah.
And how important it is, if it's important at all anymore, to know the people that you're working with, to see them, to touch them, to be with them, versus you're on a conference call, you're on a video conference with them, and many times you don't see them for months, but they're doing the work.
Yeah, I've got an old-fashioned view of that because it's worked for me in the past. At EM Systems, we were at 20 employees before we hired someone we didn't know. Every one of our first employees was 1 degree of separation away from us. Bob Hedgecock was our CTO. I knew him since we were, before we went to college. We knew each other our last year in high school. On and on and on. Joy Krausert, who was our first CFO, was Sue Marks, the CFO. And I could go on and on with every single one of those employees. Now, I mean, our sales guy I've known since 1999. Bob's our technology guy, again, who I've known since 1986. Our other sales guy I've known since he was a sophomore in college, on and on and on. So, I think we're doing the same thing. I don't mind hiring friends. I actually enjoy hiring friends. I think we have more accountability when you hire someone that you know. You know what you're going to get. I mean, I say this over and over again. Anybody can fool me in a half-hour or an hour-long interview, right? And I can fool most people if all I have is an hour with them. But if you've got a lifetime with them, if you've got months and years with them, then you really know what you're dealing with. So I actually thrive on hiring people I know. I guarantee the next 5 people we hire at Dynamis are going to be people that are 1 degree of separation either from me or our board or our owners. So I'm kind of old-fashioned that way. Now, to the remote work environment, that's where I actually have a lot more leeway. So I don't care if you're physically in the office as long as you're getting the work done. Bob, I think, is a great example. Bob goes home, picks up his kids at 4 o'clock from school, plays with them, puts them to bed at 7 or 8, and then he works for 3 hours. I have no problem with that. He's working more doing it that way than if I said, no, you got to be here till 5. So, I tend to not care if you have the face time in the office, as long as we have the accountability, and that's worked for me. And it's worked for our type of company. I know companies are different. If we're running a foundry, you can't really pour the lead from your bedroom, right? Or from your home office.
That would be a good idea.
Yeah.
What do you think we need more of in the Milwaukee area, in Wisconsin, to bolster a startup's ability to expand, to grow, to be successful, and hopefully to stay here? All the supporting functions that you need to be successful in this area, instead of reaching out to India or DC or wherever it is.
Yeah.
What do we need here?
I think it starts with an obligation of the people who've made it, the people who have the capital, to really reinvest here. I mean, you can invest anywhere. If you got your portfolio, you can invest in your stocks, you can invest in whatever. Take a piece of it, at least a piece of it, and reinvest it right back here. And if you have trouble finding where to invest it, something's wrong with you, because there's entrepreneurs budding all over this region. There's a group right here. There's a group called the Graduates. They get together in this club every Friday morning and have breakfast. And they meet with people like us, sharing their ideas. You could go on and on and on, all these different groups. The startup groups, they're everywhere. So what we've got to do is connect the folks that have the talent, the expertise, the experience, and the capital with the folks that have the ideas and the energy, and just make it happen. I see it's happening in pockets. I mean, we do it at the Foundry, we do it at other groups. So it's happening. It's just happening, in small scale. There's no one person coordinating it all, and I think that's fine. If 6 or 7 different groups are trying to do it and one gets it right, then we can all learn from them. So it's happening here on a small scale. It should happen on a larger scale, and I think it's our responsibility, as those who can invest, to actively invest back in our region. Dan's group is doing a really good job of that with targeted investments that they're doing.
Do you think it's more about the investors then, as opposed to other sort of functions that support a startup?
I don't know. What else would you say supports a startup? If you need law firms, we got great ones. If you need accountants, we got great ones. We got great professional services here. I mean, we've used Baker Tilly. That's who we've happened to use for all of these companies. All right, we use different law firms, but we've got the support network here, I think.
So what are you working on now, and what made you decide to start something up again?
Yeah, it's Tim again. I was actually leading a really cushy life for that company that bought us. It was an easy, fun job, traveling around, just doing it, not working very hard, and making a lot of money, because that's just what big companies do. And Tim's like, I found this little business, and I think we've got something there. I think they have a really good idea, but they don't know how to run a software company. It was a group of insurance brokers that came up with some software to help their agency. And like, I think we can sell this all around the country. So we did our due diligence, probably not enough. And we said, you know what, I think there is something here. This was in April of last year, so we got together with our investors. We used the Golden Angel investors, came in, did the company, put our board together, and then we went off with about 6 or 7 employees, what we thought we were doing was going off to scale the company. And what we learned within the first few months was we were really going off to do a series of experiments to figure out if any of our assumptions were valid, most of which were not. And so I think one of the biggest differences in doing a startup versus doing a mid-size or a large company, mid-size and large company is all about execution and scaling. Startups or product launches are all about experimentation. All right, we got our pricing wrong up front. We had our target market a little bit wrong. We had our product completely wrong. And we had our promotion or our value proposition completely wrong. So if we'd scaled at that point, we'd have just been dumping money away all summer, and we'd probably be bankrupt.
One of the things that I see as interesting as an outsider coming into Milwaukee is somebody else has mentioned the conservative culture and all that here, and it's resistance to risk. Experiments are risky. So how do you see the nature of an experiment and the culture of the city at odds?
Yeah, it is at odds, actually. That's a really good observation. Startups are risky and experiments are risky, and either you're stupid or crazy or bold, I don't know what it is, to jump in and do that. But that's exactly what it is, and you've got to have the stomach for it. Look, this summer, before we got it right, I mean, these guys know. I wasn't on Ambien, but I was taking Benadryl because I'd wake up at 3 in the morning wide awake thinking about all these problems that we hadn't solved yet, and I couldn't get to bed. And I was driving myself crazy all summer. I'm like, why don't we have more customers? What's going on? What's wrong? I mean, you know, some of you guys that know me really well remember that, and it was miserable. And I didn't know if this company was going to make it. I'm like, oh my God, what did I just do? Because we hadn't gotten that right yet. We kept at it, and we kept at it, and we think we have it right now, and you know, things are moving in the right direction. So, you know, there's enough people out here, though, I think that are willing to take that risk and willing to do it. I certainly see them. I see a lot more ideas and a lot more people than I see capital and money and investors. That's from where my vantage point. I'm seeing a lot more ideas than people willing to take bets on those folks.
If it makes you so miserable at the beginning, why do it again?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. And you know what? I mean, it's nerve-wracking, and I don't sleep at night sometimes. But it's kind of fun, too. And it's fun getting in the room with these folks and creating something and solving these problems together. I mean, it is actually. It's kind of fun. And it's just not for everybody. But, yeah, it's fun during the day, and it's fun when we all get together and talk about how we're going to do it. And it's not fun at 2 in the morning when you can't sleep because you're so nervous about something that you haven't solved yet. But good grief, I think we kind of do that to ourselves in all aspects of our life, right? I mean, you could say that about why get married, right? If it's going to drive you crazy. Well, there's a lot of good things about it, too, right? So I hear.
From your viewpoint as both an entrepreneur and an investor, what could be or what can be the tipping point for the Midwest and Wisconsin in particular in stopping being a flyover state and starting to be an innovation hub, a Silicon Valley for the Midwest? Those
are all the right things. Everything you talked about. Our company takes advantage of the tax credits. All right? And that's why we have as many investors as we do. That's part of the reason I think we have as many investors as we do. And it's certainly part of the reason we have more time to experiment and get this right. Our company is taking advantage of WEDC, MEDC, and City of West Dallas funding. All right, we moved our company to West Dallas. We love it there, and they gave us a little incentive to move there. And of course, we took advantage of all that. There's a lot of that stuff going on. The tax credits, the policies coming out of Madison have been evolving to be very, very pro-business, especially when you compare us to our neighbors to the south. We've just leapfrogged over them when you look at the incentives of where you should start a business. So now we got to tell people about it. And we've got to get some successes under our belt and then shout this stuff from the rooftops. I mean, I think we're doing a lot of the right things in terms of policy.
Thank you very much, Andy.